I made a promise to a man whose name I can't tell you, in a country I'm not supposed to talk about, during an operation that officially never happened. I told him I'd get his family out when the time came. When that helicopter touched down, there was room for one person, just one, and I had to choose. That was 4 years ago. I still wake up some nights hearing his voice. Not angry, not accusing, just accepting, like he'd known all along how it would end. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that in 2019, I was part of a joint special operations task force operating in northern Syria. Our mission was intelligence gathering, finding high-value targets, mapping networks, preventing attacks before they happened. Boring work most of the time. Interviews, surveillance, paperwork, then moments of absolute chaos when everything went sideways. That's where people like Khalil came in. I met him on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were market days in his village, and our team leader thought the noise and crowds would provide good cover for a meeting. Khalil ran a small shop that sold phone cards, cigarettes, and the kind of knockoff electronics that barely worked, but nobody could afford to replace. He was 42 years old, slight build, graying beard, hands that shook when he poured tea. He had 3 kids, 2 daughters and a son. His wife's name was Rania. He showed me pictures on a phone with a cracked screen, the kind of photos every parent carries. Birthday parties, school ceremonies. His youngest daughter had her mother's smile. "I want to help you," he said in careful English, "but I need something in return." That's how these relationships always started. Information for protection, intelligence for money, cooperation for a visa someday, maybe, if the bureaucracy aligned and someone in Washington remembered your name. "What do you need?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "When this ends, when you leave, or when they discover I've been talking to you, I need you to take my family out. Not me, just them." I should have asked more questions, should have pushed back on the logistics, the impossibility of making guarantees in a war zone where nothing was guaranteed. But I looked at those photos again, and I thought about my own daughter back home, and I said yes. "I promise, when the time comes, I'll get them out." He nodded once, slowly, like he was sealing something important. Then he started talking about weapons caches and supply routes, about which imam was preaching radicalization and which local official was taking bribes from which militia. Khalil knew everything. His shop was the kind of place where people talked freely because nobody important ever noticed the quiet guy selling phone cards. For 6 months, Khalil fed us intelligence that saved lives. He told us about an IED placement that would have hit a convoy. He identified a safe house being used to plan an attack on a refugee camp. He drew us maps of tunnel systems that our satellites couldn't see. And every time we met, he asked the same question. "The promise still stands?" Every time I said yes. I meant it. That's what makes this harder. Our meetings followed a pattern. Khalil would leave a chalk mark on a specific wall when he had something urgent. Otherwise, we met every 2 weeks at rotating locations. His shop, an abandoned building on the edge of town, once in the back room of a butcher shop where the smell of raw meat covered any electronic surveillance. He never asked for money, turned it down every time I offered. "Just remember the promise," he'd say. "That's all I need." My team leader, Captain Hayes, knew about the arrangement. He was the one who had to sign off on it, who had to file the reports that went up the chain justifying our asset management. Hayes was career Army, 22 years in, the kind of officer who followed regulations because he'd seen what happened when you didn't. "You sure about this promise?" he asked me after our 3rd meeting with Khalil. "Extraction guarantees are complicated, lots of approvals needed." "I'll figure it out when we need it." Hayes looked at me the way he looked at new lieutenants who thought war was simpler than it was. "Just make sure you can deliver. Asset trust is everything. You break it, you break the entire network." I nodded. I was confident. I was stupid. The intelligence Khalil provided was gold. We rolled up 3 cells, intercepted 2 attacks, and identified a finance pipeline that led us to targets across 2 provinces. Command loved us. Our operational tempo increased. More missions, more pressure, more results. Khalil kept delivering, and I kept promising. His oldest daughter, Amira, was 17. She wanted to be a doctor. Khalil showed me her school records once, top marks in science and mathematics, despite the school being bombed twice and rebuilt with whatever materials people could scavenge. She studied by candlelight when the power was out, which was most nights. His son, Omar, was 14. Quiet kid, serious eyes. Khalil said he had nightmares about soldiers. Didn't matter which side, they all scared him the same. He wanted to leave Syria more than anyone in the family. The youngest, Lila, was 9. She liked drawing. Khalil brought me one of her pictures once. A house with a garden, flowers in impossible colors, a sun with a smiling face. She draws what she remembers before the war, Khalil said. She was 5 when it started. She doesn't remember much. I asked him why he was doing this. Why risk everything for us? Because someone has to stop them, he said. The men who came to our village, who took over the mosque, who tell my son he should be proud to fight for their cause. They're destroyers. They destroy everything. My country, my religion, my children's futures. If I can help stop even a few of them, maybe there's something left worth saving. And you think we're different? I asked. We've destroyed plenty too. I think you'll leave eventually, Khalil said. They won't. They'll be here forever unless someone stops them. So yes, you're different. Not better, just different. It was the most honest thing anyone said to me during that entire deployment. Before I continue, if you're hooked on this story, hit that like button and subscribe. There are dozens more voices like mine here. And drop a comment with your country. I'm curious where all of you are listening from. The situation in our area started deteriorating in November 2019. Turkish military operations in northern Syria were escalating. Kurdish forces were repositioning. Various militias were consolidating or fracturing depending on who was paying them. Our intelligence priorities shifted from tactical targets to strategic assessments. Who was likely to fill the power vacuum when the inevitable withdrawal happened? Because everyone knew it was coming. We'd seen this before in Iraq. Political decisions made in Washington, operational reality on the ground catching up weeks later. The question wasn't if we'd leave, but when. Khalil knew it too. Our meetings became more frequent, more urgent. He was passing information faster than we could process it, like he was trying to justify his eventual extraction by proving his worth one last time. They're asking about me, he told me in late November. We were meeting in a half-collapsed building that used to be a school. They wanted to know why I asked so many questions. What did he say? That I'm a businessman. I need to know who's coming and going, who's paying for what. He seemed satisfied, but he's watching me now. We can move you, get you to one of our secure facilities until extraction is arranged. No, if I disappear, they'll go after Rania and the kids immediately. I need to stay visible, stay normal until the moment we leave. He was right. Asset protection was always a balance. Keep them safe enough to operate, but not so protected that their cover was compromised. Khalil's safety was his normalcy, his routine, his boring predictability. How much time do we have? He asked. I don't know. Maybe weeks. A month or 2 if we're lucky. And the promise? Still stands. I'm working on it. I was lying. Not intentionally, but I was. I'd submitted the paperwork for Khalil's family, visa requests, protection justifications, strategic asset documentation. It was sitting in someone's inbox in Ankara, or Baghdad, or Washington. These things took time, months usually, sometimes years. We didn't have months. Hayes pulled me aside after a briefing in early December. We're getting withdrawal orders, probably January, maybe sooner if things accelerate. You need to finalize arrangements for your assets family. I've submitted everything. It's working through the system. The system's slow. Our timeline isn't. Start thinking of contingencies. What kind of contingencies? Hayes looked uncomfortable, like the kind where you have difficult conversations about what's actually possible versus what was promised. I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him we had an obligation, that I'd given my word, that this man had saved American lives and deserved something in return. But Hayes had been through this before. He knew how these stories ended. "Figure it out," he said, "before the timeline figures it out for you." I met with Khalil 2 days later. We sat in the back of his shop after closing time, drinking tea that had gone lukewarm while we talked. I tried to explain the bureaucratic delays, the approval processes, the complications. He listened quietly. Then he said, "How many people can you evacuate when you leave?" "I don't know yet. We're still working out the logistics." "Guess." "Maybe 25, 30 if we're lucky. Assets, interpreters, key sources, people who will be targeted the moment we're gone." "And how many people have you promised to evacuate?" I didn't answer. "More than 30, Khalil said. It wasn't a question. The silence stretched between us. Outside, someone's radio was playing music, Arabic pop, tinny and distant. "I'm going to get your family out," I said. "That's not changing." Khalil smiled. It was sad and knowing, and it made me feel like a child being humored by someone who understood the world better than I did. "I believe you'll try," he said. 2 weeks before Christmas, we got confirmation. Withdrawal orders issued. Timeline accelerated. We had until January 15th to wrap up operations and extract all personnel and approved assets. 3 weeks. The evacuation list was brutal. 48 people approved for extraction. We had helicopter capacity for maybe 30 on the initial lift, with the possibility of a second run if the security situation allowed it, which meant someone had to decide who got on that first helicopter and who waited for a second one that might never come. Khalil's family wasn't on the approved list. The visa requests were still pending. Some bureaucrat in an embassy somewhere was reviewing their paperwork while their lives hung in balance. I went to Hayes. "I need you to add 4 names to the manifest." "Can't do it," he said. "The list is already over capacity. We're cutting people, not adding them." "This is my primary source. 6 months of intelligence. He saved lives." "He's not an American citizen, not a critical asset category, and his paperwork isn't approved. I'm sorry, but there's no room for maybe." "I promised him." Hayes's expression hardened. "Then you shouldn't have. You don't promise things you can't guarantee. First rule of asset management." I tried going around him, called contacts at the embassy, at CENTCOM, at every office that might have authority to add names to the list. Nobody could help. The timelines were too compressed, the approvals too complicated, the political sensitivities too delicate. I was running out of time and options. Now here's where everything changed. But real quick, if you're invested in how this ends, I genuinely appreciate a subscription. More soldier stories drop daily. Comment your country below. Always amazes me how far these reach. I met with Khalil on January 2nd. It was our last scheduled meeting before the evacuation. I'd been dreading it for days. We met at the school building again. It was raining, that cold winter rain that turned everything to mud. Khalil arrived late, which wasn't like him. When he came in, he was soaking wet and breathing hard like he'd been running. "They know," he said. "Not everything, but enough. Someone saw us meeting, or someone analyzed the pattern of attacks we've disrupted. They're putting it together. We need to move you now. Forget the schedule, forget the protocols. No, listen to me." Khalil gripped my arm. His hands were shaking worse than usual. "They've been watching my house, my shop, following Rania when she walks to market. I have 3 days, maybe 4 before they act, so I need to know, can you get them out?" This was it, the moment I'd been avoiding. I could lie to him again, buy more time, keep the hope alive for a few more days, or I could tell him the truth. They're not on the approved list. The paperwork didn't come through in time. I'm still trying, but how many spots are there on the helicopter? It's complicated. How many? 30, maybe 32 if we pack tight. And you have 48 people to evacuate. We're working on a second lift, if the security situation holds, if we can get clearance. Will there be a second lift? I couldn't lie to him anymore. Probably not. Khalil nodded slowly. He walked to the window, looked out at the rain. His shoulders were shaking. I thought he was crying, but when he turned around, his face was dry. Can you get me on that helicopter? You? Yes, absolutely. You're classified as a high-value asset. Your name's on the list. Just me, not them. Khalil, just me, he repeated. That's what you're telling me. I can leave, but my family stays behind, to face the people I betrayed, to answer for my choices. The way he said it made something crack inside me, because he was right. That's exactly what I was telling him. I'm going to fix this. I've got 11 days. I'll find a way to get them on that helicopter. I'll bump someone else. I'll call in every favor I have. Stop. Khalil's voice was quiet but firm. Stop promising things you can't deliver. We stood there in that ruined school, rain hammering on what was left of the roof, and I felt the weight of every easy promise I'd made over 6 months. I'm sorry, I said. I really thought I could do it. I know. Khalil reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. I need you to give this to Rania after you leave, not before, after. Can you do that? Of course. And I need you to make me another promise, but this one is different. What? Promise me that you'll get on that helicopter on January 15th, that you won't do anything stupid trying to fix this, that you'll go home to your daughter and you'll live with what happened here. Can you promise me that? I stared at him. You're asking me to promise to abandon your family? I'm asking you to promise to survive, because if you don't, then everything I did was for nothing. I took the envelope. It was heavier than I expected. I promise, I said. Khalil smiled. Good. That's one promise I know you'll keep. He left first, disappearing into the rain. I stayed behind, holding that envelope, feeling like I'd just failed the most important test of my life. I didn't see Khalil again after that meeting. He stopped leaving chalk marks, stopped answering the emergency contact protocols. 3 days later, I heard that his shop had been burned. The local militia claimed it was an accident, electrical fire. Nobody believed him. I tried to find out what happened to his family, put out inquiries, checked with our intelligence sources, called in favors from people who owed me. Nothing. They'd vanished, either gone into hiding or already taken by the people Khalil had been informing against. I hoped it was the first option. I suspected it was the second. Hayes found me in the operations center on January 10th, 5 days before the evacuation. We've got a problem. Militia checkpoints are popping up on all the main routes. They're looking for people trying to get to our base, checking papers, detaining anyone suspicious. Can we adjust the evacuation plan? Already did. We're moving it up. 72 hours from now, January 13th, 0400 hours. Anyone not at the base by then gets left behind. That's 2 days early. I'm aware, but if we wait until the 15th, half these people won't make it through the checkpoints. This is the call. 2 days, 48 people scattered across the region, some of them hours away, all of them trying to reach our base without getting caught. The odds were terrible. I spent those 2 days barely sleeping, coordinating movements, arranging transport, trying to get everyone to the extraction point alive. 31 people made it. 17 didn't, caught at checkpoints, too far away to reach us in time, or simply too scared to risk the journey. Khalil's family wasn't among them. I kept hoping I'd see them appear at the gate, kept checking the manifest every few hours like maybe I'd missed their names, but they never came. The helicopter arrived at 3:47 hours on January 13th. 2 Blackhawks, loud enough to wake the dead, downdraft kicking up dust that turned the whole compound into a brownout. We had maybe 10 minutes on the ground before every hostile force in the province knew where we were. Hayes was calling out names, checking people off the manifest, loading them as fast as possible. I was helping people with their bags, lifting kids into the helicopter, making sure everyone got on board. 20 people loaded, 25, 28. "That's capacity," the crew chief yelled over the rotor noise. "We're maxed out." "3 more," Hayes shouted back. "We can fit 3 more." The last 3 names on the approved list boarded. A Kurdish translator and his 2 teenage sons. Good people, deserving people, people who'd risked everything to help us. The crew chief made a cutting motion across his throat. "That's it, we're done." But there were 2 more people standing there. A man and his elderly mother. They weren't on the list, had never been approved, had just shown up hoping for mercy. "Please," the man was saying, "please, we can't stay here." Hayes grabbed my arm. "We're out of time. We need to go." "What about them?" "They're not approved. We can't." "There's room for 2 more people. The helicopter's not at weight capacity." "It's not about weight, it's about paperwork and the ass covering we'll have to do if we extract people who weren't cleared." Hayes pulled me toward the helicopter. "This isn't your call and it isn't mine. Now get on board." I looked at those 2 people. The man was maybe 50, his mother probably 70. They were holding hands. They knew what was coming. I got on the helicopter. I need to tell you what happened next, but first, if this story's got you, show some love with a like and subscribe. I read every comment, especially love seeing where you're all from around the world. The flight to Turkey took 90 minutes. 90 minutes of watching Syria disappear beneath us, while I thought about all the people we'd left behind. The 2 at the airfield, the 17 who never made it to the base, Khalil's family and his wife and children, wherever they were. I kept my hand in my pocket, wrapped around that envelope he'd given me. I still hadn't opened it. We landed at Incirlik Air Base just after sunrise. The evacuees were processed, medical checks, debriefings, temporary housing arrangements. Most of them would spend months in refugee limbo while their asylum claims worked through the system. Some of them would eventually make it to the United States or Europe. Others would end up in camps, indefinitely displaced. That's the reality nobody talks about. Extraction isn't salvation. It's just a different kind of waiting. I opened Khalil's envelope that night, alone in my quarters. Inside was a letter, handwritten in English. His handwriting was surprisingly neat, like he'd written it carefully, maybe multiple drafts. It started, "If you're reading this, then I didn't make it, and you kept your promise to get on that helicopter. Thank you for that." I almost stopped reading there, but I kept going. "I want you to know something that I couldn't tell you before. I knew from the beginning that there wouldn't be room for my family. I knew the moment you made that promise that it was probably impossible. The math was always wrong. Too many people needing rescue, too few seats, too much bureaucracy, too little time. But I needed you to make that promise anyway. I needed my family to believe they had a future beyond this war. Without that hope, Rania would never have let me continue working with you. She would have insisted we run, hide, try to slip across the border on our own. And we would have been caught, or lost in the refugee system, or drowned trying to cross the Mediterranean. The promise gave us time. It gave them hope. It gave me the courage to keep providing intelligence even when it got dangerous. And it gave me peace, because I knew that even if the promise couldn't be kept, it meant someone cared. Someone saw my family as more than just collateral damage in someone else's war. Even if you couldn't save them, you tried. You wanted to. That matters more than you know. I'm writing this letter on January 1st. I know the evacuation is coming soon. I know the math won't work out. I know you're probably tearing yourself apart trying to figure out how to keep your promise. So I need you to release you from it. This isn't your failure. It's the failure of a world that creates these situations. You did everything you could. You kept me safe enough to do important work. The intelligence I provided saved lives. That has value. Maybe not enough to balance what happens to my family, but something. When you read this, I'll probably already be gone. They'll have figured out what I was doing or gotten close enough that I had to make the choice myself. I made peace with that outcome a long time ago. What I need from you now is this. Don't let this break you. Don't let the guilt consume you. You have a daughter waiting for you at home. She needs you to be whole, to be present, to be the father she remembers. My children can't have that anymore, but yours still can. Carry this weight if you must, but carry it forward. Use it to be better, to understand the cost of these wars, to remember that every name on every list represents a family, a story, a life that mattered. The second part of this envelope contains documents, names, dates, locations of people I informed on. When this is over, when the security situation is different, if you can find a way to help my family, these documents might be useful, or they might just be paper, but I'm giving them to you anyway, because hope dies last. Thank you for trying. Thank you for caring. Thank you for making a promise you couldn't keep, because for 6 months, that promise gave my family something to hold on to. That's worth something. Maybe everything. Your friend, Khalil. I sat there for a long time holding that letter. Then I pulled out the second part, a thin stack of papers, meticulously documented intelligence that Khalil had compiled over months. Evidence against militia commanders, corrupt officials, war profiteers. Names and crimes in his neat handwriting. And tucked at the bottom, 4 photocopied documents. Birth certificates for his 3 children and a marriage certificate. Everything someone would need to prove their identity if they ever needed to claim asylum or refugee status. He'd planned for this. He knew it would end this way, and he still did it anyway. I didn't cry. Couldn't somehow. Just sat there feeling hollowed out and heavy at the same time. The next morning, Hayes found me in the mess hall. He looked like he hadn't slept either. Debriefs at 1400. They'll want a full report on your asset relationship. Just stick to the intelligence he provided, the operational value. Don't get into the personal stuff. He knew, about the promise, that it was impossible. Hayes sat down across from me. Most of them know. The smart ones figure it out early. They need the hope anyway, and we need them to believe we'll follow through. It's a necessary fiction that keeps the whole thing working. That's cynical as hell. That's honest. Hayes rubbed his face. You think this is the first time I've made promises I couldn't keep? I've got a drawer full of letters and photos from people we left behind. People who trusted me, who worked with us, who believed we'd take care of them. And when the math didn't work out, when the timelines got compressed or the approvals didn't come through or the political situation changed, they got left behind. And you're okay with that? No, but I keep doing the job anyway because the alternative is having no one work with us at all, and then more people suffer. So we make the promises, we try to keep them, and when we can't, we carry the weight. That's the deal. I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him there had to be a better way, but I'd been there, made those calls, watched that helicopter fly away with empty seats while people who needed rescue stood on the ground. I knew he was right, and I hated him for it. 3 months later, I got an email from a contact in the refugee network. Khalil's family had been located, or what was left of them. Rania and Omar had made it to a refugee camp in Turkey. They'd escaped the initial sweep, hidden with relatives, eventually made it across the border. Amira and Lila were gone, taken by the militia when they came for the family, used as leverage to try to find Khalil, then disappeared when it became clear he wasn't coming back. The email included a phone number. Rania wanted to talk to me if I was willing. I sat staring at that number for 2 days. What could I possibly say to her? I'm sorry I promised your husband something I couldn't deliver? I'm sorry half your family is gone because your husband worked with us? I called anyway, because Khalil had asked me to try, and I owed him at least that. Rania spoke limited English, so we mostly communicated through a translator at the refugee agency. She wanted to know what happened to Khalil, if he'd suffered, if he'd been afraid, if he'd died quickly. I told her I didn't know, that the last time I saw him, he was brave and calm and thinking about his family, that he'd left her a letter, but it had been in that envelope and I didn't have a copy. That was a lie. I'd memorized every word of Khalil's letter. But some of what he'd written was for me, not her, and I didn't know if sharing it would help or hurt. Rania was quiet for a long time. Then she said something in Arabic that the translator hesitated to repeat. She says thank you for trying, for caring enough to try. I almost laughed, or maybe cried. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I wish I could have done more. More silence. Then, she says Khalil told her this would happen, that you would apologize for things that weren't your fault. She says to tell you that some promises are worth making even when they can't be kept. They give people something to hope for in the dark. We talked for another 20 minutes. I told her about the documents Khalil had left, the intelligence that saved lives. I offered to help with her asylum case, to use whatever connections I had to get her and Omar somewhere safe. She accepted. Not because she forgave me or because it fixed anything, but because practical help was more useful than apologies. It took 11 months, but we got them asylum in Germany. A small apartment in Frankfurt, resettlement assistance, language classes. Omar enrolled in school. Rania got work at a grocery store. I visited them once, 2 years after the evacuation. Took leave and flew to Frankfurt with a suitcase full of guilt and hope for I don't know what. Closure, maybe? Forgiveness, possibly? Amira answered the door. He was 16 now, taller, with his father's serious eyes. He recognized me immediately. You're the one from the letters, the soldier my father trusted. Not the soldier who saved him, not the hero, just the one his father trusted. It was more than I deserved. Rania made tea. We sat in their small living room with pictures of Khalil on the wall, pictures of Amira and Lila, a shrine to the family they used to be. I brought something, I said. I pulled out a folder, copies of all Khalil's intelligence reports, sanitized versions that removed classified details but showed the impact of his work. He was a hero. Rania looked through the papers slowly, then she set them aside. He was a father who made terrible choices for good reasons, who sacrificed everything so his children might have a future. 2 of them do not have that future now. 2 of them might. That is what he accomplished. It wasn't accusatory, just factual, a mother's accounting of costs and consequences. I'm sorry, I said again, because I didn't know what else to say. I know. Rania poured more tea. Khalil told me you would be sorry. He said you were a good man in a bad situation. He said the important thing was that you tried, that you cared, that you didn't see us just as assets or problems to manage. He said that had to be enough. Is it enough? Rania looked at the pictures on the wall, her lost daughters, her disappeared husband, the life they used to be. No, she said quietly, but it's all we have. We spent the rest of that afternoon talking about small things. Omar's school, Rania's job, the way Frankfurt felt too cold and too clean and too different from everything they'd known. They were alive and safe and deeply damaged, survivors of a war that hadn't ended just because they escaped it. When I left, Omar walked me to the door. "Do you think about him?" he asked. "My father?" "Every day," I said. And it was true. Good. He deserves to be remembered. I flew home the next morning, went back to my life, my daughter, my new assignment at a base in North Carolina where the stakes were training exercises and the consequences were bruised egos instead of body counts. But I kept that letter, Khalil's last words, his release from the promise, his understanding of the impossible mathematics of war and rescue and hope. I read it sometimes when the guilt gets heavy, which is more often than I'd like to admit. I learned something from Khalil that the military never taught me, that sometimes keeping faith with someone means accepting you'll fail them, that sometimes a promise has value even when it can't be fulfilled, that the attempt matters even when it's not enough. I also learned that I should never make promises I can't guarantee, that hope has a price and sometimes other people pay it, that good intentions don't absolve you from consequences. Both things are true. They contradict each other. I live in that contradiction. 4 years later, I still think about that helicopter, the empty seats that weren't really empty because of weight restrictions and manifests, the people left behind because the math didn't work, the family I promised to save but couldn't. I think about Khalil standing in that ruined school, asking me to promise to get on that helicopter without him, understanding that some failures are inevitable, but still insisting that the attempt has meaning. I think about Amira, who wanted to be a doctor, and Lila, who drew impossible gardens, and how they disappeared into the chaos we helped create. And I think about Omar, 16 years old in Frankfurt, who asked if I remembered his father. Every day, I told him. Every single day. That's my story. That's my weight to carry. Some of you will think I should have done more, found another way, refused to leave without them. Maybe you're right. Some of you will think I did all I could in an impossible situation, that I shouldn't blame myself for systems and timelines beyond my control. Maybe you're right too. What I know is this. Khalil knew I'd fail him, and he asked me to promise anyway, because hope, even false hope, has power. It kept him going. It kept his family cooperating. It gave him courage to do work that saved lives. And when I couldn't deliver, he released me from the guilt because he understood something I'm still learning, that in war, there are no clean choices, only choices that cost different things. I got on that helicopter like he asked. I went home to my daughter. I survived. But I carry him with me. His trust, his sacrifice, his impossible understanding. I carry Ranya's quiet devastation and Omar's serious eyes and the pictures of two girls who drew gardens and wanted to heal people. I carry the weight of a promise I couldn't keep to a man who knew I couldn't keep it, but needed me to make it anyway. That's the real war. Not the one you fight overseas, the one you carry home. The one that doesn't end when the helicopter lifts off. The one made of people you couldn't save and promises that mattered even when they failed. Khalil taught me that some promises are worth making even when they're impossible, because the promise itself, the fact that someone cared enough to try, has value. It says you're not alone. It says your life matters. It says someone sees you as more than collateral damage. But he also taught me the cost of those promises, the weight that falls on families when the promise can't be kept, the guilt that follows you home, the way hope can become a weapon that cuts the people holding it. I don't have an answer for how to balance those truths. I don't know if there's a right way to make promises in war zones where nothing is guaranteed. I just know that I did, and I failed, and Khalil forgave me for it before I had a chance to ask. That forgiveness is the heaviest thing I carry, because I'm not sure I deserve it. My daughter asks me sometimes why I'm quiet, why I stare at nothing, why certain news reports make me leave the room. I tell her I'm fine, that I'm just thinking about work, that she shouldn't worry. Someday I'll tell her about Khalil, about the promise and the helicopter and the letter, about a man who knew I would fail him and trusted me anyway, about his children who paid the price for his courage and mine. Someday I'll tell her that her father is not a hero, that I made choices that seemed right at the time and turned out to be catastrophic, that I carry the weight of those choices every day and will for the rest of my life. But I'll also tell her what Khalil taught me, that trying matters, that caring matters, that the attempt to do right, even when it fails, has value, in a world that often doesn't try at all. I'll tell her that I got on that helicopter because a brave man asked me to, because he needed someone to survive and remember, to carry his story forward, to make sure his sacrifice meant something. So that's what I'm doing, remembering, Carrying forward, trying to be worthy of the trust Khalil placed in me, even though I know I failed him in the way that mattered most. I still have the documents he left, the birth certificates, the intelligence reports, the evidence of crimes that may never be prosecuted. I keep them in a safe deposit box along with his letter. Sometimes I take them out and look at them, remembering a quiet man in a phone card shop who decided that stopping evil was worth dying for. Omar emails me occasionally. He's in university now, studying international relations. He wants to work for refugee organizations, helping people navigate the same system his family barely survived. He's turning his trauma into purpose, which is more than I've managed to do. Rania sends pictures sometimes. Her at work, their apartment with new furniture, Omar at graduation ceremonies. Evidence of survival, of rebuilding, of life continuing despite everything. But Amira and Lila are missing from those pictures, will always be missing. That's the cost. That's what couldn't be saved despite the promise, despite the trying, despite everything. And I live with it. Wake up every morning and choose to keep going, because Khalil asked me to, because someone needs to remember, because the weight of broken promises has to mean something or it's just weight. I've thought a lot about what Khalil said in that letter, that some promises are worth making even when they can't be kept. I've turned it over in my mind for 4 years, trying to decide if I agree with him. I think I do. Not because the promise prevented the tragedy, not because hope somehow made the loss easier to bear, but because the promise acknowledged something fundamental, that his family mattered, that their lives were worth the attempt, that they deserved more than the hand they were dealt. In a war where people are reduced to asset management and risk assessments and acceptable losses, that acknowledgement has weight. It says, I see you. Your family is not expendable to me. You are not just a source or an informant or a line on a manifest. You are a father who loves his children, and I will try. The failure doesn't erase that acknowledgement. Maybe it even reinforces it, because easy promises kept don't mean much. It's the impossible ones, the ones that cost something to fail at, that show how much someone meant to you. Khalil knew that. He understood it better than I did. He made peace with the math before I even recognized there was math to make peace with. And he released me from the guilt so I could carry his story forward instead of drowning in shame. That's a gift, an impossible, painful, complicated gift from a man who had no reason to give me anything. So I'm using it, telling his story, making sure people know about the quiet heroes who risk everything in wars they didn't start and can't stop, making sure Amira and Lila aren't just casualties, but names, people, children who deserved better, making sure Khalil's sacrifice meant something beyond intelligence reports and prevented attacks, that it meant something human and personal and important. That's all I can do. Remember, honor, carry forward, and live with the weight of a promise that mattered even though it failed. Because Khalil was right about one thing: hope dies last. Even when it kills you, even when it costs everything, even when the math is impossible, hope is what keeps people going in the darkness. I gave him false hope. He knew it was false. He held on to it anyway. And somehow, in a way I'm still trying to understand, that mattered. Not enough, never enough, but something. Maybe everything.